Hello, yet again to another episode of the Artist Forge Live. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host, and today with me are my talented, wonderful, really good-looking co-hosts, Matt Stagliano and Becca Bjorky. Hello, hi friends. How was your weekend?
The weekend was great.
Oh, that's terrible. Sorry. I made bad layout choices, is what happened. I fixed it though. Um, we have some friends joining us as well. So just really quickly, if you are hanging out with us today, would love for you to say hi in the comments so we can say hi back to you. Don't forget that StreamYard does require permission to use your Facebook name. So if you want to be able to see your name there, you do have to put that on Facebook. There's a link somewhere. I forget the things, but whatever. You can just type your name in there as well and we'll remember who you are. So we already have friends. Hi. While we wait for more friends to join us, Matt and Becca, how are you guys? How are you hanging in there?
Well, I wanted to ask you guys a question. I watched the entire House of the Dragon this weekend, and I like their use of different cast members in different episodes. But perhaps we can have random timeline conversations. A deconstruction of their plot from House of the Dragon through season 947 of Game of Thrones. And I'd love to see and hear from you, especially Nicole, the writing, the continuity, all of that. So I'm just thinking forwards, some future episode of this. I'd love to get super fantasy nerdy and talk to you guys about it. What do you think?
We can definitely do that.
Okay.
Is there like specific things that you're thinking of and you're curious about, or?
No, just the I don't know how I feel about House of the Dragon just yet. I liked it. I think some of the writing was a little weak. But I was in. Like I was in on it. Like I want to fill this up. So much so that I've started Game of Thrones again. So there goes the next 3 weeks of my life. And no, it's been great. I kind of like the way they did it. Still like Rings of Power better than House of the Dragon, but I'm gonna step back from being a complete nerd
We
and
can't be friends anymore.
say hello.
No, I love it. It's so great to be sitting here and like I'm watching Becca's face and wait, hang on. Here we go. I'm watching Becca's face and I'm listening to Matt, and it's so funny to see just the whole interesting conversation around the fact that there being no accounting for taste and no objective standard based upon which you can say one thing's objectively better than the other. Like rarely can you do that, right? With any kind of art form, rarely can you say here is a thing that is objectively better than another. I know, watching Becca's face, it's okay, you can disagree. I'm right, but you can have your own opinions. But so rare can that happen, that it's just kind of cool to watch people and see their reactions, because you do wonder when you really believe a thing or you feel a certain way about the thing, listening or watching somebody who disagrees with you, even if they have all the best reasons for disagreeing in the world, it's like you cannot comprehend how you can both have seen the same thing at all. It feels like you're missing entirely. Like there's no meeting in the middle. We didn't even watch the same show at this point or read the same book at this point. So I love that, like sitting back and watching the interplay of expressions. But before we have any of those discussions, I do want to talk about something before we start on that, because I've been having an interesting experience and I want to see what you guys and our friends in the audience think. And it's about not making money on purpose. So I want to see, so I want to see what everybody thinks about that. But first, before we do that, keeping our fantasy things in the back of our mind, Becca, how was your weekend?
It was weekend. I was kind of sick all weekend, so that sucked. But yeah, other than that, nothing spectacular.
Just one of those, we did it.
We did it.
We made it. We made it through. Okay, so David is already sharing some thoughts, so I'm definitely going to bring those up in a moment. But I have something on my mind that I want to talk to you guys about choosing not to make money as an artist, as an actual business person, artist, and I want to get your thoughts on this. I'm going to start with something I saw once on a TikTok, which is an auspicious beginning, and then reference that to some choices my husband and I made, and then to what I am thinking about in regards to my author career. So I was scrolling through TikTok one day, like you do, and a chef was making a video of her I think she was just making some bread. But what she said was essentially, I was a high-powered chef making a lot of money in my chosen career, and I was miserable. And I realized that the answer is not to make the most money. The answer is to make enough money so that you still have time to do all of the things that you love without the pressure of what it takes, right? Because making a lot of money takes a huge investment of time and effort and money as well. I mean, let's be real about this. Most of the artists I know and the authors I knew who are making multiple 6 to 7 figures are spending $5,000 to $10,000 a month on Facebook ads alone. And like, you know, the numbers just go up from there. And the amount of people that have to have responsibility of a huge platform like that just increases. And as that happens, your responsibility to those people increase because you're only one person. So pretty soon you're bringing on assistants and you're bringing on marketing people and you're bringing on et cetera, et cetera. And now you have to make sure those people can put food in their mouths as well. So the responsibility and the breadth of that responsibility just gets bigger and deeper. My husband and I had the chance to move to the East Coast and work for a company that was going to pay my husband almost double 6 figures. So, you know, upwards of $200,000. And along with his retirement from the military, that was a significant amount of money. But we would have to live kind of right around the heart of Washington, D.C., where the cost of living is significantly higher than where it is now. He would have essentially that job would need to be his life because the level of responsibility for that gig is like, if we call you, you need to be here. You need to, you know, if you're not done at the end of the day, you're just going to keep working because this shit is really important. And despite the fact that that kind of money for a family like ours, who's been essentially a single income household for the 20 years that we've been married, once I was out of the military, that's life-changing money right there. But what it would have cost us in terms of daily life just did not seem worth giving up. And then now in my career, I'm at the beginning stages where I can still, like, I still have all the branches of the tree ahead of me, and I'm going to have to choose which forks to go down. And I saw an author say that they had made a mistake with building their career because they thought that what they wanted was to get as many people as possible to read their books. And of course, every author wants as many people as possible to read their books. But the platform that they built and the structure that they built was created around the foundation of big business. And she realized once she had got there, once she was making $100,000+ a year, she realized this is not the life I want to live. I would rather have 1,000 people who just love my work and want to engage with me and love the world than 50,000 people who will read my book in a day, discard it, and grab the next one as if they had never read the book at all. It's just a placeholder to keep their mind busy until they pick up the next piece. And it struck me, as all of this stuff tends to do, it conglomerated together. And I was like, okay, do I want to make all the money? I mean, like if I could just have all the money, that would be great. Like I would definitely like to have all the money, but do I want to live the kind of life required of me to earn multiple 6 or 7 figures? Do I want to have to write a book a month, have to manage a crew of 15, have to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? I don't think I do. I think I would rather have a relatively small community of really passionate people who love these worlds and love these stories and want to talk about them and geek out about them and get lost in them, and who will pick up anything I write and hang out with me on live Discords and watch stupid movies together and maybe meet once a year and go someplace cool and live our fantasy dreams together, right? Like I would rather have that than to be forced to carry the burden of what making $1 million a year would do. I would rather have that and more time. I would rather be able to get lost in the woods and not stress out about a deadline than be able to go on an extra trip and save an extra 20 grand. And I wonder how many times as artists we think about that. Like, how often do we go, do I really want all the things I think I want? Or is what I want something else? Like, is it the freedom that I want? Is it the community that I want? Is it the whatever? Because of course we all want enough money to be comfortable, but there's maybe a point of diminishing returns as far as happiness goes, right? And so how do we figure that out for ourselves? And I'm wondering now, I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I'm really curious about what y'all think. And so David already kind of saying like, okay, let's talk about not making money, shots fired. So I would love to know, friends in the audience, have you thought about this before? And what do you think, Becca and Matt, what do you guys think about this? You know, the coach is here. Hang on. Coach Parrish says, working for a paycheck isn't always bad, but if you have to sell your soul for the opportunity to have more money, will take the breath you need to live an abundant life. Yeah. And maybe that's a great word to use. Like, I would rather have abundance of time, abundance of community, abundance of that than just money per se, or the responsibility it takes to maintain that money. Yeah. So time to open it up. I would love to hear what you guys think. Of course, love to see you here, Coach. Miss you so much. I'm shutting myself up now.
Becca, your thoughts?
I have thoughts. So I've been reading this book. And that's kind of almost the basis of this entire book. So it's sort of pertinent and on my mind in general. I know I shared some tidbits with you guys in our little Artist Forge chat. And I like, okay, so I've done both. I have sold my soul for money, even within the arts. And I have chosen to not do that in the arts. And I definitely think there is something to choosing to not make the giant amount of money. Absolutely. Like, I know my first big girl photographer job, it was like the dream job. I got to work for a studio. I got to travel. It was like I was young and I was like, I've done it. I have done it. I've succeeded in reaching the goal. And I kind of hated it. I hated having to take the same pictures all the time. I hated having to meet other people's expectations. I hated the clientele and the like models and their families and stuff that I was working with. I did not like it at all. And so what if I was living my dream as a photographer when it wasn't actually fulfilling me in any way? And making, what at that time for me was felt like a lot of money. It was not what I needed, even though it seemed to check all the boxes, right? I mean, you can even think of it as almost like dating. Like, you meet the right person and they got a good job and they got a good house and they've got a nice family and whatever. And you don't like them and it's not working, but you feel like you have to stay in it anyway because they're the right person, right? Similar thought process. I will say my husband is really good at this. He just walked out of the door. I was going to grab him to be a guest speaker for a minute, but he is really, really great at rejecting promotion because of what that would do to our family life. And he's put in bad hours. He worked nights for years. He's, done a lot of overtime. He's put up with a lot of bullshit in his corporate retail hellhole that he works for. But he has learned the power in rejecting promotion because that would upset his ability to spend time with the kids, his ability to spend time with me. Like, we actually have been scheduling time together for us every day, which is something like we would not be able to do if he had completely variable kind of like management, very high level management hours. And that also, it gives him the sense of control because he is spectacular at what he does. Like, he's the kind of person who should be in that very high level in the business, but he doesn't want it because it would take away from that happiness, from living that life he wants to live, that wandering in the woods, or, in his case, wandering around in Skyrim or whatever he's playing, so there's absolutely power in that. I mean, what is the point of doing it all if you're not enjoying every other moment in your life? Like, I did that for most of my early 20s. It was a necessary evil. It is not a necessary evil here in my 30s. So final thought to pull from this book, which is great. Cal Newport's awesome. Anyway, he's talking about a concept called self-determination theory. And self-determination theory tells us that motivation in the workplace or elsewhere requires that you fulfill 3 basic psychological needs, factors described as the nutriments required to feel intrinsically motivated for your work. Number 1, autonomy, the feeling that you have control over your day and that your actions are important. So that's where we're coming to that, not chasing the $1 million paycheck. Competence, the feeling that you're good at what you do. And relatedness, the feeling of connection to other people. Nowhere in there is a 7-figure paycheck.
So good. And I'm sure I'm like encouraging now, if David is still hanging out, Coach Parrish, I'm encouraging, because I know he has talked about this with us in the Artist Forge so many times, this idea of self-determination. So encouraging that. Good stuff. Okay, Matt, would love to hear your thoughts related to that as well.
Yeah, and I'm sure you guys have heard of this. I'm sure David has as well. There was I want to say it was Harvard. I'm going to talk with complete ignorance here, but sound like I know what I'm talking about. There was a study coming from Harvard, I want to say 10, 12 years ago, something to that effect, that said, if you make above $75,000, it doesn't increase your happiness. I'm sure that number has changed based on economic changes over the years, but there's a threshold at which people think that their life is going to get better if I make more than $100,000 or $200,000. And that's not the case. You hit this threshold, and then there's no demonstrable difference between making $75,000 and $200,000. It just doesn't change your happiness. Because when it comes down to is we find that in that lower income, right, 75 down, let's say, I'll call that lower, but 75 down, you're doing things that give you that autonomy, that give you that self-satisfaction. In the corporate structure that we have now in those higher paying jobs, typically there's a lot more bureaucracy, there's a lot more management, it's soul sucking. It takes all the fun out of what you're doing. You're giving up your freedoms. You're becoming a slave to whatever it is somebody else wants to do and what their agenda is. Now, that's not every single case, but if you're looking at the bell curve, right, there's a big fat part of it for a reason. And I think most of us find that tipping point, 75 grand, 50 grand, 10 hours a week, whatever it is, there's a moment where we shift from this is great, it's work, it's hard, this is great, I enjoy it, to this sucks, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't care how much you pay me, how many more hours, right? And I went through that. I was making 160, 175 grand a year as a consultant, and I gave it all up to take pictures of people shooting guns because I couldn't do it anymore. I couldn't do another PowerPoint presentation or sit on another call or have another meeting to talk about when we're going to schedule another meeting to have another meeting. And it was just drudgery, and it tore my soul apart. I was depressed. I lost my marriage. I lost my home, like all these things. It just wasn't fun. And when I took a year off to kind of figure out what the hell do I want to do, I realized it had nothing to do. The money's nice, don't get me wrong, but it's not fulfilling to me. Having a business is nice. It's not fulfilling if you're not doing what it is that you love to do. So yeah, I think there is a way that you can have both. It really comes down to what is it that you want, right? And this is a lot of the work that I'm doing lately in the self-value from the self-value standpoint, and thinking about my own direction for the next, I'd like to say 40 years. A good 15 will make me happy. Of saying like, what is it that I want? What's going to make me feel good? And at no point up there is there a number. There's financial security, but what does that mean? There's, connection with my clients. Well, what does that mean? And I'm just trying to define more clearly what it is that I want so that I can go after that. I know from 35 years in the workforce that the money is always there. The money will always show up. No matter how poor I've been or how wealthy I've been, the money always shows up. So why not do something that makes you feel great as a human, that helps you help other people in whatever that is, writing a book, serving soup at a kitchen. What are the things that drive you to make you feel good? The money will come. But there's more satisfaction in feeling like you're centered and that you have a purpose than there is to say, look at all the zeros in my bank account. Aren't I great? because it's at that point you're searching actually for something else. You're searching for affirmation or ways to fill some sort of void in you. So figure out what you want. If that money's what you want, go after it. But the populace tells us that it's not about the money, it's about this self-satisfaction. And I think if there's anything that the past couple of years has given us, it's the opportunity to sit back and look at us ourselves and say, what is it that we want?
I think, no, that's great. I'm going to grab David's comment as well. I think money generally guarantees security, but I think Matt's talking about individual success, which, right, isn't a universal thing. And I mean, sure, money guarantees security, but like what I'm talking about is where the line is at, right? Like, where does this line go from being secure to having abundance to having an overabundance? And then what is required of you to reach each one of those levels? And it's interesting because I think there is a strange kind of, having grown up poor, and anybody who has grown up poor will know this, you work really, really, really hard for not very much at all. You are selling all of your time for not much money. And then you hit a point where you are now selling your skill instead of your time. And when you sell your skill, you have the opportunity to make more money. But to move from that security position to an overabundance position requires that next jump, right? And I know we've talked about the ladder of mastery before and how there's really huge growth. And I'll just reiterate this in case anybody's listening who's never heard of the ladder of mastery. Essentially, it is that the bottom rung of the ladder is something called unconscious incompetence, meaning you don't know what you don't know. And in that phase, most of us feel like we're pretty good at the thing we do, right? You first picked up a camera or a paintbrush and you're like, dang, I got to do this for a living. I am good. And then the next phase is called conscious incompetence. And this is where you start gathering enough information to realize you really weren't as good as you thought you were. And you probably should learn a few things. And you don't really have the skills you need yet to be able to be comfortably good consistently at what you're doing. So you learn, and then you reach conscious competence, which is where you're doing a good job. You know what you need to know, but it's still a thing that you have to focus on. You still have to practice it. Like, you're not just hitting every ball out of the ballpark every time. And then finally, when you get to the very top of the ladder of mastery, you become unconsciously competent, meaning you are good enough at the thing that you don't really have to think about it anymore to get fantastic results. So I was going somewhere with that and I completely lost it. So when you're in that conscious competence phase, and I'm just going to liken this, and there's nothing scientific that says this is a relation, but it's a metaphor that's going to work in my head. So we'll see if it works for you guys. When you're in this conscious competence stage, let's say that this is the I'm making enough money stage, right? Like, I'm secure. I'm not overly abundant, but I'm secure. To get to this next stage, this final ladder of mastery, this overabundance, you have to fight and scrape and scream and cry, and the amount that you actually grow is very, very minimal. Like, the amount between somebody who's getting a gold medal and somebody who's just, who made it to the Olympics is millimeters. It is, it is a 1/10 of a second or 100th of a second in time. Like, the amount between greatness and really goodness is very, very small, but it requires a lot of effort to cover that space. And you can see this probably if you have a hobby that you really love and you're pretty good at golf, but you want to be great at golf. It requires you working way, way harder than it did when you just started and you're like, I'm getting good at golf. And you went from, shooting 4 over par to maybe getting par sometimes, and you grew really fast and you're like, cool. And then when you wanted to get really good and you wanted to get under par and you wanted to get birdies and etc., you had to work way harder than you ever did before. And I think that makes sense to me as a way to differentiate what it is like to make enough and be like, this is cool, and then what it is like to make it's fighting really, really hard for this much difference in skill, but this much difference in income. And that often requires, at least if you look at it from a author standpoint, that often requires significantly more input as far as time and effort and manpower than it does to be like, maybe I'm making 50 grand a year and I got extra money in my bank and we're saving and we're investing and we're comfortable and that's enough, right? Like, and I'm not saying that I necessarily am wanting to stop there, but like, maybe maybe this extra work, maybe we don't want that. Like maybe.
I had the same conversation with someone over the weekend where, we're talking about imposter syndrome and the inevitable comparison that you do to other people in your industry, right? And it is what it is. But I mentioned that I see certain folks in the industry that are doing extraordinarily well, that are getting tons of opportunity, and things are going really well. But the amount of time that they have to put in to do that, the amount of time that they're on their phone or networking or traveling or doing this, that, and the other, if that's what it takes, I don't want that, because I don't want that lifestyle. So I'm making the conscious sacrifice that I know that I may not have what they have, even though part of me might desire it. I do not desire constantly being tethered to a phone. I do not desire giving up my sacred free time just so that maybe I can get a few more customers or clients or fans or numbers on a platform or whatever. That doesn't satisfy parts of me. So I'm making those conscious choices to say, you know what? Okay, well, if I need to reframe things and be happy where I am and make incremental gains for my own success, then I get to dictate that. And it feels good to have control and say that and be like, yeah, you know what? It's not $1 million a year business. That's okay, because you get to see the sunset and have a drink while you're doing it. You get to hang out with friends. You get to see people. You get to create art on your terms. Wonderful. But if I want to be an influencer and a large educator and travel all over the place and be a person of influence, it takes a lot of shit these days, and I just don't have the energy to do it. You know what I mean? I'm like,
Yeah.
I've reached this level where I'm like, I'm making a comfortable living. I'm cool with it. All right, let's just kind of ride this out for a while, see how that goes. And
So
maybe taste will change, but yeah.
I have a question for Matt, just because I feel like you had a much more stark transition from real job life to art life than Nicole and I. So Tom in the comments says, selling your skill, not your time. So true. Don't know why I've never heard that before. Yeah, and Tom's a rad photographer up here in Portland. So hi, Tom. Anyway, I feel like that is a really, really important distinction. And I've definitely witnessed other people who have decided, like, I'm gonna go be a photographer when they're in that unconscious incompetence phase, and then it doesn't really work out so great. But I know, like, for me, when I went full-time artist, I've been working at the art for a good 10 years or longer. Like, that was always the end goal, always. But for you, Matt, like, what was the deciding factor, aside from I hate being a corporate sellout? What was it? You're like, I'm at a point where I am valuable enough as an artist that this will be a financially viable thing for me to go do.
Well, I'm unconsciously incompetent as we speak, so I've got a long ways to move here. For me, well, getting fired was kind of the reason that I left corporate, because they just didn't want me anymore. Me and 15,000 others. It wasn't something that I did. It was just a big layoff. Like, it wasn't just like, that guy, get rid of him. But that's when I went into consulting, and I said, okay, well, I get rid of the corporate stuff. Now I get to be cool and like do all this really cool stuff and be boutique-y. And then I just realized that it wasn't the language that I wanted to speak. It wasn't the people that I wanted to surround myself with. It was giving me feelings that were just a lot of dissatisfaction. Just a lot of like, what the fuck am I doing with all of this? Why am I on a conference call with India at 1 a.m, just sitting there being a name on a screen, not even talking? Like, what is that all about? I'm giving up certain aspects of my life for nothing. And that didn't sit well with me. When I moved over into photography, yeah, I had no idea. Dunning-Kruger effect was really strong with me. I'm like, I'm the best photographer ever. I just put it on this little green right here, and I take it, and it takes a beautiful picture. I didn't know anything. I just knew it made me feel really good to do it. And then people started paying me. I didn't set out to be a photographer. I didn't set out to be an artist. It was just me going, okay, I guess I should figure out what to do during this year I'm taking off. And I started taking pictures, and they just started getting noticed on social media. I caught the right thing at the right time in the right niche. And it became commercial work like that, magazines, commercial work, campaigns, things like that. And I was like, all right, well, might as well build a business around this. And for the past 10 years, I've been trying to figure out how to do that. But even so, after 7 years of doing one style, I was like, this isn't fulfilling anymore. This isn't doing it for me. I want to shift again. So I know for me, it's a constant check in. It's a constant like, hey, how are you feeling about this? Is it time for you to move on or do something different? Because I really do want that contentedness, that peace, that inner feeling of satisfaction. And it doesn't matter what I'm doing. I just look at this journey and saying, where do I want to land right now? Maybe the corporate stuff was there to get me to photography. Photography is there to get me to education. Education's there to get me to sit on a beanbag chair and teach yoga when I'm 75. I have no idea. I'm just rolling with it. The good thing is I know enough about myself to know when things aren't right and you need a radical change. I think we all have that intuition. For me, when it comes to working, those are the things that I check in on. How do I feel here rather than what does my bank account look like? Because no one wants to see that. But I feel really good, you know? So like even now I'm going through a period where I'm like, is this the style of photography that I want to do? Or do I want to shift? And is it out of boredom or is it out of need? And so asking yourself all of these questions really helps you hone in on, is it something else that's bothering you, or is it what you're doing? Is it the money, or is it something else? So it takes a little bit of, honesty with yourself to figure out where you're at. But for me, it's never been money. It was just kind of like, I don't have any other options. Let me figure this out. I got a camera. Let's do this. And here I am, whatever, 10 years later, 12 years later.
Doing it.
Am I?
I want to grab this really quickly because I think it's a fantastic observation.
Yeah.
Measure in what matters to you. And I think that that's a kind of a great lens through which to look at this conversation, because we've talked about this before. Most of the time when people want money, it's not money they actually want. Like nobody wants to just hold a wad of paper and ink, right? We want the freedom, or we want the security, or we want the ability to reach a wider audience, or, we want these things that money can make easier to obtain. And narrowing down what those things are, I think is a great first step in knowing what matters to you and then making decisions based around that. But it's really interesting that you bring up, Matt, that, maybe those are going to change. I mean, for now, maybe I know what they are. And then in 5 years, maybe that's going to change. And I think there's also something to be said for the idea. And I know, I feel like it was a coach who said this. David's probably going to remember if somebody else does tell me, but that this idea that I'm here to make you do the things you don't want to do so you can be the person or achieve the things you've always wanted to achieve. I feel like it was a basketball coach or a football coach who said that. But the idea being that sometimes maybe in order to get where we want to go, we are going to have to spend a certain amount of time living a life we're not super excited about, understanding there's something on the other side of that, right? And so maybe we will go through seasons of, this is not what I signed up for, in order to get to the place that we want to be. But I think that is it's worth looking at and investigating the lives of people who are where you want to be and finding out what their daily life is like you mentioned earlier, Matt. And I know I mentioned before, I had this conversation with my son when he was talking about maybe wanting to be a lawyer. And my answer was not, let's look at what lawyers make and where they're getting hired at. It was, well, let's go find out what a lawyer's daily life is like. And then you see if that's the kind of life that you want to live. And granted that there are widely different manifestations of these lives. So even as an author, you have the very few, right? The 1% who make it big and everybody knows their name and they can make enough for one book that if they wanted to, it could sustain them for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And so they don't have to show up as hard every single day all the time. And then you have, you know, maybe an indie author who's making 7 figures a year, but they're also putting out a book a month and they're writing and they're doing this and they're doing that. And like the load of work is so heavy that in order to sustain that, they have to live a life that is burning them out. So like I said, there's different manifestations of that. And I think we really need to find people who are doing those things and get some clarity on, is there a path forward here? Because for me, maybe there is not a path forward into 6 or 7 figures without living a life of constantly doing work that I'm not happy with. And if that's the case, what do I need to be? Like, where do I need to be? Maybe I'm only making $60,000 a year, but I'm just living in a smaller house in a smaller place. And you know what I mean? I mean, who knows? But I think we need examples. We need to look at those daily lives and then do that, you know, measure what matters. Like, maybe it's not what we thought it was.
That clarity is interesting. Like how do you even determine, you know, if you are getting a clear picture of that? Like, I know within art sphere in general, often the people who look like they're famous and they're successful and they're doing all the things right, and then they're not actually making all their money, if they're making money off their art. You know, they're making it off their tutorials or whatever, their YouTube channel, which is totally fine if that's what you want. Like, go for it. Hell yeah. Like, get your bag. I don't care. But I feel like it's very easy. And I know I'm guilty of doing this myself, of looking at someone and thinking they are my version of success. And then later finding out they're not actually doing the thing that I thought they were doing, or the thing that I personally want to go do. And it's not, I don't think it's intentionally misleading, but it is misleading, especially to younger or newer people into the industry. Like I had a kind of mentorship call with someone recently, very new, wanting to build a photography business. And they pointed out a couple different photographers they were really inspired by. And I'm definitely like internally thinking, like, the things you're saying you want to do are not what these people are doing. You want to shoot for big fashion magazines. And that's not what these other artists are doing. I think there's a path to do what this person wants to do. I think that if they apply themselves correctly, they could. But the idols that they were bringing up and wanting to emulate were not actually doing those things. So in the case with authors, with photographers, with illustrators, whoever it is, how do you define that clarity? How do you find those? Do you ask them? Do you just read people? Like, what's the path?
Yeah, that's a great question. I want to bring up Dennis's comment really quickly. He said a friend who used to run the photo program at a big art school mentioned this very idea: what makes us happy, and maybe the path to happy is not about doing more, but about doing less. And so in questioning that, right, and looking for that clarity, I think we also have to maybe start by looking at our own lives and asking ourselves, like, when was the last time I felt just full, content, radiant? Like, when was the last time I felt that way, and what was I doing? What did my life look like? And I know that for me, I have to have a level of work. I need to be producing a thing. I need to have whatever's in my imagination be coming to life and be able to hold it in my hands and be like, look, I've made a thing. I need that. Does that mean that I always have to sell that thing? I don't know, maybe not necessarily, but I need to be making it. I need to have really close personal relationships with people where I can be around them, where I can see them and smell them, and we can hug each other. And like, that's important to me. That matters to me. I need to have time with my husband and with my kids where I don't feel like they're intruding on my productivity. And that is the grossest feeling, right? To have a person you love show up and be like, hey, I'm here to spend time with you, or I want your attention, or I just read a thing that was really cool and I want to share it with you. And you have to go, I am busy trying to make money right now, right? Like, the feeling of that just sucks, because in one way it's a necessity, and in another way it just feels icky. I want to be able to have the time for those things. So if we start by looking at our own lives and the things that we don't like and the things that do make us feel happy, that might be a good, at least baseline to begin with, to say, this is the clarity that I need. And then maybe there are other processes and we can talk about that. But for me, I think that's maybe a good place to start, at least.
It's when I spoke at the high school here a month or two back, we were having this career day and I was brought in to talk about career in the arts. I guess they didn't have anybody else. So they brought me in and I was the only person talking about a career in the arts. And quite frankly, I barely talked about what I did. I turned it around on the students. I said, what do you want to do? What is it that you want? And posing that, I wish somebody had asked me that question when I was 16, to ask me, what is it that you want? Right? And at that point, 16, all the hormones running through your body, you don't know anything. But it's a good question to start thinking about what makes you happy, what satisfies you. Is it the arts? Is it basketball? Is it technology? Like, what are the things that stimulate you now where money isn't an issue? What makes you happy? What makes you content? What makes you feel good and safe and productive and energetic? What are those things that you do that make you feel that way? And lean into that a little bit. It might not be your chosen career, but it's going to bring you so much more satisfaction than just saying, this is the job that I could get. Now I'm trapped at Foot Locker for the rest of my life, right? I think people really don't ask themselves the question. It's certainly not in adulthood what we want. And oftentimes that is nothing material. It's more often something emotional that we want. And we use money or we use material things to get us closer to it because we feel it's going to get us there, right? So this is why I'm kind of a perpetual student, right? But also a failure to launch. I love taking classes. I love buying classes. I've got all the tutorials. If anything ever, Creative Live goes down, Pro EDU, Sue Bryce, don't worry. I have backups of everything on my computer and can just upload them all. I love taking classes because I always feel like if I just get this one more, then I'm going to be better. I'm going to be where I want to be. And that's never been the case. Not once, not ever. And that is the same analogy to everything else that we try to do in life. We think that this one more thing is going to get us closer instead of asking ourselves the question, what is it that we really want out of this? Is this going to make us whole or complete or content or peaceful or happy? We don't ask the question, what do we want, enough? Some people will land on finances, some people will not. I don't know, it changes for me all the time, but I think it's a simple but incredibly complex question by asking yourself, what is it that you want?
So our related question.
Obvious. Yeah.
Regarding your tutorial addiction, question one, what is it that you want to accomplish by buying those tutorials? I also have a large stash of tutorials I've never watched and have paid too much money for. And second part of that question, are you then, when you do get to them, applying the new knowledge towards making yourself better and then hopefully thus getting what you want?
Sure.
Question mark?
To answer that, the reason I buy them is a lack of self-confidence. I don't feel I'm good enough at anything to do anything. And that's just a deep-seated shit that I have in me, right? It's just, I don't feel confident enough in my work that it's at a level that people will want to buy it. I have a studio, people buy my work all the time. So it's completely antithetical to what's going on in my brain. But I'm always looking for, if I could just learn that one technique, give me frequency separation, teach me Maxon 3D, something, I will be a better artist.
I don't want to interrupt, but I'm gonna. What do you think it is that when you learn that thing, what are you going to get from it? Like that deep-seated thing of once I get this, then what is that actually doing for you? Like, what do you think it's going to fulfill or give you?
So there is again, also growing up poor, there's this sense that I want to hoard. If I just have it, then I'll be safer. It'll make me feel better. right? I'll have more skills. Someone will love me more. I'll get more affirmation, right? That's really where it all comes from. If I buy this one thing, it will turn me into a different person that people will then like, right? That's a big driver, man. It's a big driver in my world. And so I realized at some point that what I was creating was good enough, was doing fine. That these tutorials weren't making me any better. They were giving me new insight to things, but I already had the skills that I needed to do what I wanted to do to make this complete. I wanted to start a business with photography to make money, keep a roof over my head. I've done that. I don't need to learn 3D modeling to make that any better. How? I know, but, and I said that just to get a rise out of you. So, but when the second part of your question, do you apply anything that you kind of, that you buy now? Yes, absolutely. Everything that I purchase now has a pointed thing. I want to learn this technique. I need to learn this because I have this thing in my mind. I've seen someone else do it. They use this technique. Let me start researching that. So rather than saying, I want to build a house and I go to Home Depot and buy one of everything they have, well, I don't need a plunger if I'm building a desk, right? So why do I feel the need to buy everything if I'm really just focused on making this type of art? So I'm starting to apply now the things that I buy almost immediately. Customer service, business, finance, certain photo techniques. I've gotten away from all the presets and all the things, right? And it's just about me now. So what I'm buying is shoring up my business rather than just casting this wide net, hoping to magically become an artist by osmosis. I don't know if you guys have seen this little video now of this Asian little boy who's reading and he's just wafting the words over him. Have you seen this?
Yes.
Like, he just turns a page and that's what I was doing with tutorials. I'd buy one and then just stare at the screen and hope it washes over me and I absorb it all. It's not the case, but yeah.
I think that's a very healthy approach, Matt, actually. Like, as far as tutorial addiction and needing a support group, as Erica says in the comments, I think that's the right way to go about it, though. And even if you are metaphorically building a house and then you're building the desk and you don't need a plunger, in the realm of home ownership, you may still need that plunger. So having that in the archives for you, and having that knowledge at hand, at brain, it's still valuable. It's still valuable. And I think, having a variety of things, I think, where was it? So somewhere in the comments too, David says, this is so relatable. I buy tutorials for things I'm actually good at already. And I think that is the key distinction here, where yes, you should be a lifelong learner. You should continue pursuing things, whether that's YouTube University or spending $200 on someone's hour-long video. Doesn't matter. But if it's something new that will apply in some shape or form, that is where the pursuit of knowledge should be. Because if you're already good at something, you don't need to necessarily keep practicing it that way. If you don't know how to do it, that's what you should be spending the time and the effort on.
I think that's a really good point, because when you're beginning, you don't know what you don't know. And so you're after everything, and particularly the people that you admire the most, the people you want to be like, right? So you get their things because you think, I'll do it and I'll be like them. And then you learn more and you realize, I am never going to be like them because I want to be like me. And so you keep buying more things, many different things from many different places. And you go, okay, what is this person doing here that I can take? And this person doing here that I can take? And then you get to a point where that space, that one particular space now, all you're doing is trying to dump water in a full bucket, and it's not really doing anything. You need another bucket now. And maybe that other bucket is digital art. And as you learn more about digital art, that transfers itself. Now you have two buckets full of water instead of one bucket you just keep trying to fill up, right? And those things can cross-pollinate, and you can learn more about retouching, and that helps with your photography, and retouching also helps with drawing, and that helps with photography. And all of a sudden now you have these kind of group of bucket of skills. But something to consider as well. So we've talked about that in relation to our self-confidence, but we should also talk about that in relation to, somebody said this, and I think it's true of me, my hobby is to learn stuff. My hobby is not photography, and my hobby is not art, and my hobby is not whatever. My hobby is learning things. So I'm just going to keep taking from everywhere because that is what I like. That's what I like to do. I want to know everything about everything, even if it's not related to my specialty at all. And some of us are just going to have that. Like, and I think we can be okay. Like, we have to recognize if that's what it is. If it's just, I want to know stuff, you're going to teach me about physics? Gimme, because I just think that's cool, right? As opposed to like, I'm specifically trying to get better at one thing, and so I need this stuff. But also, you know what you need when you get to a place that you can distinguish that, right? Which is what I tell people when they ask me about gear. What camera should I get, and what lens should I have, and what? Just use what do you have your phone now? Use that until you go, this isn't doing this thing for me. I can't take good enough portraits in low light with this. I can't see far enough with this. I don't have a big enough sensor. Like, once you get to the point and you're able to say, I can't render faces the way I want to, then you know what you need to learn. Until that point, you're really just groping about in the dark, and there's a really good chance you're going to spend money and time in places that won't benefit you. So like, allow those artistic restrictions to let you figure out what you need yet. I want you to follow up with that, Matt, but I want to grab these really quick. David's saying, with tutorials, I think we're often buying a dream. It's like a lottery ticket. I get it, and all the dreams come true. We're buying someone else's success in the hopes of repeating it. But again, is their success the idea of success that we seek? So important to ask ourselves that question. This one didn't work. I need to try my luck with this instructor. It'll work for sure this time. Tom saying, I think a lot of people don't know what other buckets they want to start filling up, and so they keep pouring into that overflowing bucket. And that's a really, really great point. Really important point, Tom. To be fair, I've learned a ton from instructors online. Of course, yes, absolutely we do. I don't know how much money I've spent on things I did not need, and classes that taught me zero. At this point, it's probably in the multiple thousands, until I went, I'm not doing that anymore. I'm going to go learn from illustrators instead. I'm going to learn from cinematographers instead. I'm going to learn from storyboard artists, and et cetera, et cetera. Am I a visual artist? Cool. I'm getting out of my own field now, and I'm going to go figure out what these guys are doing, because painters can teach photographers so much, and illustrators can teach photographers so much. And God, please go learn from cinematographers. If you are a photographer and you want to do anything with your life, please go learn from cinematographers. They know so much about telling stories in so many different ways. But yeah, that's one thing to consider, I think, Tom, when we're trying to learn maybe what other buckets we need. Expanding out a little bit from our centralized, position might help. Matt, I can tell you've got thoughts over there.
Oh, I've always got thoughts. That was really just about, I should probably let my dog out soon. But I think I'm a marketer's dream, right? You show me a good deal, right? You can save 11 cents on this. I'm going to buy that. I don't need it.
How did you end up with that as a Gen Xer?
I have no idea, but I buy it.
We're switched, because I'm like, you want me to buy something? I don't want it now.
Yeah. No, I buy it, and then I don't look at it, but I have it. I've got something you don't have.
Just in case you need it.
It's just stupid. But the point is, like, I think you can see in the comments, right? We're all very similar. We buy all this stuff and never finish it. We never go through with it, right? So it's kind of the one good thing about college system that I don't believe in college system anymore. But at least you had to show up for class, and you were stuck there from 2 to 3 o'clock, and you had to go through the whole thing. Online classes, I realize that I buy a lot of them thinking I'm going to absorb that, when the actual learning occurs when I just do the thing myself, when I just smash my thumb with the hammer, right? I don't have to go buy a tutorial of how to use a hammer better. I just have to keep my thumb out of the way, right? And I think a lot of us are buying these tutorials and diving into that education. The student mindset is awesome, and I love that. It's growth, right? That's where I love being, and I love seeing other people in that. But I don't think that buying any of these tutorials is really filling for us what we want it to fill. I think David nailed it by saying that maybe we can absorb some of that success from somebody else. It's an emulation of what we see, and that's perfectly okay too, right? That's the
It's an
teacher
important way
did
to learn.
something that you didn't do, right? I took
Yeah.
this course from Cara Marie on customer service. Amazing. I thought I had great customer service. I realized I had a lot of gaps. Very useful for me. But for me to get another tutorial on color or retouching or, photography styles, I got them all. I haven't watched them. Like, the only way that I can develop my style is to do the stuff myself. And I think that gets lost. We chase the dream rather than believing in ourselves enough to follow that inner voice and just do the thing. And when you bump up against something you can't do, that's when you ask somebody else or you find a tutorial for that specific thing to keep you on your road instead of having that road go all over the place and you never really get anywhere.
I will say personal brain hack to fight this
Adderall
has been subscription services to learning programs. That has been very effective for me. Like, I know I bought a month at whatever academy online when I know that I'm going to have the time for it, and then I'm all in. And it's like almost more emulating that experience of being in a classroom where it's like, I know I've got 30 days to get my $90 worth out of everything here. And then I'm down with the note taking and the practicing and the following along step by step to actually do the thing and get the most out of it versus something that would just sit on my hard drive or, in my account somewhere. But yeah, doing the thing. I mean, I have a question, but I have to think of how to say it. So I'm going to stop.
I just have to say, on the thing of subscriptions, I asked for a subscription to Masterclass for my birthday last year. Ask me how many classes I watched last year. 0. Which is terrible. And it's not because I didn't want to learn stuff. There's a lot of people on there I super duper admire. It's because I decided to pour all my energy and focus into a certain area, and I couldn't let things step in and distract me. So maybe an important...
you have the time. And if you're spending your own money on it and you're like, okay, this is the thing. And knowing yourself, if that does work on you or it doesn't, I mean, it's got to be self-aware.
Right. Well, and knowing where you're at, right? Because that was not the right year to do that.
Mm-hmm.
When I was like hyper focused on the other stuff, that wasn't the right time. And maybe next year will be the perfect time, or the year or whatever. But for that just wasn't it. Wasn't the right time. Did you figure out how to formulate your question?
Kind of. And I guess that's sort of related. So how would you guys recommend determining where it is you need to pour that mental attention and that practical effort into something new to learn how to do it, to be better, and then thus better yourself as a professional, right? Like, I know for me, like I sometimes I want to do this thing, but I don't know specifically what to call it or something. And eventually, I'll figure it out. But the more I can measure it getting better by whatever creative metric, whether that's asking people I know's opinion or putting something embarrassing out onto the internet and asking strangers' opinion, which is terrifying but effective. How do you guys determine this is what I need to improve at, and this is how I know that I have actually improved?
I flounder around until I hit walls. And then I go, oh, there's a wall. How do I get over it or knock it down? And then I had a really terrible, awful mental image, but I just, for some reason, pictured myself as like a big, crazy octopus or something, and like limbs going in every direction, just looking for boundaries, right? Just like, wah, trying to take over my whole space, being like, I can't get over there. Knock that shit down. I keep expanding and flopping about until I find something else. But really, that's kind of how I do it. I mean, I begin with a little bit of research, like, okay, I'm going to stop being a full-time photographer and freelance writer and start being an author. Okay, where do I even start with that, right? And I do what research I need just to get the wheels rolling in the right direction. And then as I'm rolling along, it's a kind of like I'm learning to drive with no instructor. I know that I need to be able to push on the gas and the brake, and I know that I need gas in my tank. okay, I'm going along and then a rainstorm hits and I can't see anymore because I don't know how to work my windshield wipers. That is telling me where the problem is to be fixed. So in a big way, it's kind of like just barreling forward until pain strikes somewhere. And then that pain becomes a red flag that says, hey, your book didn't sell at all. Like, so how do you fix that? Well, okay, why didn't it sell? It wasn't really written to market. You didn't know who you were writing it for or what they expected out of books. So, okay, now I need to learn that. I did it this time. I'm selling the other book. Why isn't it selling? Well, the cover isn't to market. People who read this genre don't know that this is what that book is. Okay, now I got to learn about so that's kind of my real approach to that, is literally flopping around until something hurts and then figuring out what caused the pain and how to fix it.
I think if we're talking hypotheticals, where hypothetically I would need to improve at anything, I think this is yeah, I'm all over the place.
Clever, Matt.
Yeah, no, this is the bipolar part of this whole thing. So I know for me, part of that is the floundering until you hit a wall, and then you're like, I know what I see here. I can't seem to make that with these monkey paws that I have. I can't seem to craft this thing that I want. Where am I getting stuck? For example, like I suck at color, right? I just suck at it. And yes, I have Kelly's classes, and no, I haven't watched them. So I suck at color in photography, and I'm getting better. But what I do is I ask other people that I know are good at it what I can do better. And then they say, well, have you thought about this or this, that, the other? Here's a resource you might want to look into. Then I go back and I do that. And then I have certain metrics, right? Competition. Am I getting better competition over competition? Are my scores going up or are they plateauing? You've got to have some way to measure your progress, whether that's self-satisfaction. I'm happier doing this. I'm making more money. I'm competing better, right? Have a metric so that you can at least measure, because our brains have a great way of always resetting us to zero, no matter how good we've gotten. So like, I'm way better now than I was 10 years ago.
But you don't feel like it.
I don't feel it, right? Because
if we could only get back to that incompetent passion and like belief in ourselves.
It's why I love learning new things, because I'm like, I can suck at this and it's exciting and I can't upset anybody, right? Now I've kind of reached this spot where I still have that feeling like I don't know anything, but if I look back, like I know a couple of things here or there. I think by going to outside sources, we get out of ourselves. We can measure consistently how we're doing. And it's at that point that you can really start to look at it and say, you know what? It's really not color that I suck at. It's the composition or whatever it might be. I think so long as you have ways to measure your own progress, you'll get better insights to where you need to do that to improve. And the ways that you need to do that, who you need to ask, what avenues you need to go down. For me, it tends to be hitting that block, then asking someone that I really admire, what would you do here? I'm not saying I'm going to do it, but what do you see that I'm not doing? You know, and go on from there. Try to measure it the best you can. Does that answer it, Becca? I mean, okay.
Do you have any insight, Becca? What about you? Do you have ways that you figure out what new buckets you need to add?
I just have questions, damn it. Yeah. I mean, like I said, like, you know, looking for that outside input, especially, and I do run things by people privately a lot. And one thing that almost kind of flips it on its head a little bit is I love looking at other people's questions and look for input. And maybe it's just like some self-serving perverse joy, but like I'm definitely like in a lot of Facebook groups, right, where people be like, oh, this is I don't know, I made this thing, can someone tell me how to make it better? And I love that, because then I have to think about it, and I have to think about something that's not mine and think about what would make this more effective for me as the audience. And I love to reply to stuff like that, and I'll go overboard. Like I'll draw little notes on people's stuff and whatever, and maybe I'll send them an invoice, you know, in 6 months. Just kidding. But I know I love that for the sake of my own learning in the process of watching other people learn. And then having to get out of my own creative head, at least from the perspective of creating the art, not necessarily the wider business issues, but of creating art itself, where we're talking about color or composition or light or whatever it is, being able to then think and critique in a way something that isn't fully birthed by me. And I find that to be very beneficial, not just for whoever I'm talking to, but for myself also, just because it makes the wheels turn a lot. And of course, then taking my own stuff and be like, hey, does this work? What about this one? What about this one? What about this one? Whatever. In private, in public, it doesn't matter. And you're going to get a very different response too, depending on who you're speaking to. So speaking to your friends is going to have a very different effect than speaking to maybe a very respected colleague who's not afraid of telling you that you suck ass, versus complete utter strangers. You know, and then you get to weigh everything against itself and determine what is commonality here and what do I need to work on, and then see if you can see it to better yourself. As far as things on the more bureaucratic bullshit end, that is, I don't know that I have a metric for that. And that's something that I definitely have put thought into and have not put enough action into. I do try to, track things like how quickly do I respond to my emails? How quickly do I get things done? Stuff like that. And I have my own little apps and programs and timers and stuff for all that. But I don't have as much of a solid metric as I probably could to really level that up. But the path is there. I just need to walk it.
And I just had one more thought on that too. When going to outside sources, be pointed when you're asking for feedback.
Yes.
Give me feedback on the sharpness of this. Give me feedback on the story I'm telling. How is the color? Because if you just say, what do you think of this? Someone's going to say something that throws you so far off where you want to be. It's self-defeating. So just be very pointed with that, or try to be, right? Mm-hmm. You might just want to be like, does this suck? But if you can be pointed with that feedback, it helps you get to those measurements a little bit easier.
100%.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. And I think also just keeping in mind, going back to where we began this and then the broader conversation as a whole, keeping in mind that everybody has a little bit of survivorship bias. So when you get advice from anybody, they're going to be giving you their advice from the place that worked for them. You have to be the one who filters that through. Is this a thing that will work for me? So if you come to me as a photographer and you say, how do I get to sell my albums for $1,200 a piece? I can tell you what I did, but that's based on my life and my time and my preferences and my personality type and the way that I'm able to talk to people and the kind of product I was using. And if you don't do all those things, it may not work for you. If you are a little bit more shy than I am, or if you feel a little less comfortable talking to people, or if you still have some issues around money or whatever it is, my survivorship biases may not work for you. We all have to be really aware that we are an N of one equation, and whether or not something is going to work for us is highly, highly dependent. And the reason I want to make sure of this is because I'm experiencing it really heavily in my life right now as being kind of a baby author. Yes, I have already written 3 books, but in the industry, as far as understanding the industry and working within the industry, not just I'm a photographer, but I'm writing a book on the side, pooping it out into the world without paying attention. Now I'm trying to make a living this way, and I'm learning a lot. And one of the main things that I am learning, which is true of photography as well, is we're not all taking the same path up the mountain. Even though we're all trying to get to the top, maybe I have stronger legs than you, and so you need to zigzag so you don't have to go straight up as fast, and I can just clock up the side of the mountain. We can't take the same path always. And when you get to the top, if you start looking at the folks who are already up there, one of them is going to be like, yeah, if you want to get to the top of the mountain, what you need to do is hop on the tram that's over there. It's a really great tram. And then you're like, cool. So you go to the tram and they're like, okay, that'll be $400. And you're like, fine, I don't have $400. And then so the next person at the top is like, oh, yeah, no, you don't need $400. If you want to get here, all you got to do is put 500 pounds on your back and just, go without stopping. And you put 500 pounds on your back and your knees buckle. And you're like, well, shit, I don't have the $400 and I can't carry all that weight on my back. So what am I going to do now, right? You have to look at what people have done as a whole and really pick it apart. You can't look at any of these things like it is a perfect blueprint for you. You have to pick it apart and go, okay, well, I've got strong legs like him and I've got about this much money like her, and time wise I'm about there. So what can I mix these things up, and what do I want it to look like when I get up there? Am I planning on staying at the top, or do I just want to kind of cruise around in the middle of the mountain? Is the view important, or do I want the trees? Like, all of these things come into play, and if we don't take the time, right? Shit, there was a tram. If we don't take the time to think about any of this stuff and to look at that, then we're not going to know, and we're going to end up doing what I did, which is, there's a person I like and they're successful. I'm going to follow everything they did and get halfway there and go, I don't want this. Time to start all over again. And even if we do, and if that's where we end up, like I said, we're constantly looking for pain points. That's all learning is. You don't know that you need to learn something until the fact that you don't know it hurts you. And then you know, and you add it to your arsenal and you go figure it out. So I know we are already over time, but I want to ask friends in the audience, did you have any light bulb moments today, or after having gone through this conversation, is there anything you learned that you feel like is a good thing to share with other folks so that they can walk away with that too? And Matt and Becca, is there anything from this conversation you feel like you maybe have questions, or you just think is really important to kind of leave people with as we end our conversation today?
I think your statement, it's a N equals 1 is big, right? We're all individual. There are proven strategies out there to succeed at anything. And there are certain roadmaps that can get you there in a shorter time frame than others. But you always have to come back to, what is it that you want? What is it that you are capable of at this point in time? Where do you want to be? Ask yourself, what's the desired outcome for me, and where is that coming from? If you can properly answer that, then the options are really easy of the direction that you have to go. But you have to start asking yourself, the question is, what do I need? What do I want? And how do I want to get there? What am I willing to sacrifice? Those sorts of things. Where was the tram?
I was just going to grab that one. Where was the tram? There was a tram. That's called inherited money, my friend. That's what that's called. Becca, what about you? Any final thoughts?
I didn't get an answer to my question on who to take seriously. How to measure other people's success.
Oh, you mean, are you asking who, when somebody tells me how they got there, how do I know whether I should believe them, or like?
Yeah. Going back to are you a successful photographer? Are you a successful photography tutorials retailer? Why should anyone take us seriously? What are our credentials?
That is a good question. Okay, so really quickly, I mean, it's not like we have rules. So does anybody want to touch this one a little bit? How do you know who to trust when you're looking for advice on how to get where you want to go, and that you're not falling prey to really good marketing? If anybody has thoughts in the comments section, then do that also. But what if I don't know what I want? Which is the whole thing of like looking at your life, right? And what do I love about it, and what do I don't like about it? What would I change if I could?
I think we run off that metaphor anyway. You see the person at the top of the mountain, you're trying to figure out how you want to get to the top of the mountain. You know that you've got those strong legs and you could walk, but you kind of want to take the tram, and you're trying to figure out what to do. And then someone else notices that you've got really strong legs. And maybe, do you want to go do this hike through the valley over here? And you realize you like that a lot better.
Yeah. I mean, and that's Matt's thing of constantly reevaluating, right? Like, and allowing yourself to reevaluate, being that's okay. Because I realized something recently, that, and it has to do with the money thing as well, but essentially somebody said, they were talking about a family business, and it was my husband. He was talking about, here in Albuquerque, there was a golf business, like a family run center, and they would fit you for clubs and all of this stuff. They'd been there for like 60 years or something. And he's like, yeah, they've been there for like 60 years, but their kids don't want to take over, and so they have to close down. And my instinct was to be like, oh, that's really sad. Like 60 years, like now they got to shut down. And then it took me a second. I was like, wait a minute. They were there for 60 years. That's amazing. That shouldn't be sad that the business is closing. It obviously did for them what they needed to. It kept their family going for 60 years. Like, why is it so sad for that to end? Why do I think that the measure of success is something being eternal? Why do I think that it has to keep going forever on an uphill slope in order for it to have been successful? Why do I think that? Hello, capitalism. Why do I think that growth must be exponential always for something to be successful? Hello, capitalism. Why don't I think that it is okay to just make enough? Why is a subsistence model of business not good enough? For as long as I need it to be good enough, why is that not okay? Why does it constantly have to be, I better make more? Let me find out who can teach me to make 7 figures instead of 6 figures. How do I level up? How do I, where's my growth at? Where are my KPIs? How come I can't keep going and going and fucking going? Doesn't have to be that way. There's nothing wrong with subsisting comfortably and not putting the pressure on myself to grow like a crazy person. That is okay. So if I was going to answer your question, Becca, I'm sorry, I went completely on a tangent. If I was going to answer your question from my perspective, and there are a lot of people out there who want to teach you a lot of things, my first question is, what do they get from it? Mm-hmm. Like, what are they getting from this? And then what's their track record like? If I can go and I can look at somebody's track record and they say they're a commercial photographer, okay, can I go see who they've worked for? Can I see what the results have been? Is it a thing that I admire? What are the other things that they're doing? And how much time do they spend talking about those things? If it's a photographer and they're a commercial photographer, but they're going to teach classes, does their work look like work that I want to emulate? Does it also look like work that's selling in the market? And then what are the other things that they do with their time? Are they teaching 50 classes? And if they are, do they actually have very much time to be doing commercial work? And how do those classes sell? Do they have a lot of really fantastic reviews? Can I talk to somebody that they've worked with or for in the past? Can I get personal reviews or recommendations from people? Can I go talk to this dude and he's like, it was really good, but it didn't apply like I thought it was going to? I mean, the way that the market is built these days, the onus is really on the consumer to be a smart consumer and to make smart choices, because there are not regulations on who can teach. So, and sometimes, to be fair, people can teach really well what they cannot do. And those things are not always copacetic. You can have somebody who's a fantastic whatever, and they couldn't teach it to save their lives. And you can have somebody who's middling at it, but they're a really, really great coach, or they're a really, really great teacher, and they can get you there. So like, it's a lot of stuff to keep in mind, but it has to be on you, unfortunately, to be the one to figure out if that's going to work. And maybe if there's a smaller or a bite-sized, which is what we do now with content marketing, is we put out bite-sized pieces of information. And if that information is good, helpful, successful, whatever, it convinces somebody to then take the next step and buy the bigger piece of information. So if there is something bite-sized you can take from that person who is teaching, and you find that it is applicable and relevant and understandable and etc., then it's probably worth taking a bit of a deeper dive. I vomited everything. I'm shutting up now. I lied, I'm not shutting up. I think it isn't listening to one person or one strategy. We collect nuggets, we melt them down, reform them, and make them our own. Application tests the strategy. We have to not be married to the strategy, and feel free to adjust, adapt, and then test and test again. If there is not a universal day, how can we expect to have a universal formula? Hello, capitalism. She's had this on her heart. That's awesome. A lot lately. So many groups I'm part of equate self-worth to income. If you don't have a 10K sale, you're not good enough, or you have low self-worth. What if that's not my definition of success? And like, we can celebrate people killing what they want, right? Like, if that 10K sale is for them and that's what they want, fucking go and get it. And how do we divorce that, right, from what we want and from our sense of self-worth? And all of this is such a big, important conversation. And I know it could go well beyond the boundaries of what we've talked about today at 2:20. So we're 20 minutes over. But clearly, this is kind of a conversation we needed to have. So, yeah, Becca, I know you said you didn't get an answer to your question. That was kind of a final thought for you. Do you have like a closing statement or question for people?
Just questions, just nothing but questions.
She's sucking our information for herself is what she's doing. She's like,
It's just how I'm avoiding saying anything and running my mouth.
but I'm trying to make you run your mouth.
Oh, I don't wanna. Don't make me, Mom.
You built a career on it.
Nothing.
All
I'm
right.
not gonna say just do what you love, because there's a lot more work than that. Because I love
true.
sleeping, and that's not.
Nobody's
really
paying
now.
you to sleep in right now.
But yeah.
All right. Well, just to close up everything then, I just want to remind folks, sell your skill, not your time. There's not enough money on this earth to pay you what an hour of your time is worth. I mean, think about that. Your time here and alive is limited. It is the single most valuable commodity that you have, because every second that slips away is one you're not getting back. And there isn't enough money to pay for your life, right? So sell your skill instead. Sell how fast you can get things done, your brain, your way of thinking, all of that stuff. Sell that stuff. Don't sell your time. And then value your time in a way that means that you spend as much of it as you can doing things that you love with people that you enjoy being around, however that looks. And maybe that looks like multi-seven figures, and maybe that looks like $50,000 a year, and you're living in a van down by the river and you fucking love your van, right? Like it is a life you get to choose, those of us who can. So do it, and then try to make that choice more available to the people who don't have it. Thinking about that, I love you guys so much. Thanks everybody for being here today. David and Erica and Tom and Dennis and everybody else who was here. You guys are amazing. Thank you for being part of this conversation. We will be back next Monday at 1 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. That is noon for the West Coast and 3 p.m. for the East Coast. Come and hang out with us. We're going to have more talks like these kinds of conversations about mindset and approach are exactly the reason the Artist Forge exists. There are people already out there doing incredible tutorials, as we have already talked about, that can help you level up your skill. And we are here to help you think differently, to help us think differently, so that we can be the kind of people who achieve the things we want, and not just have the skills. So go make something amazing this week. Join us next time. Have an incredible, incredible week, and we will see you all later. Bye, friends.